Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be checking out Give and Take by Adam Grant.
Oh, yeah.
Have you had a chance to read this one?
I have. It's a fascinating book.
Yeah.
It really is.
It kind of turns everything we think we know about success on its head.
Right.
You know, that idea that you got to be a go-getter, you got to step on people, you got to be ruthless.
Right.
It's like, what if that's not true?
Yeah. What if the key is to be a giver?
Yeah.
What if the key is to put other people first?
Is that really the secret weapon to getting ahead?
Yeah. And that's what we're going to dive into in this deep dive.
Awesome.
We'll be looking at.
I am so ready to rethink how I do things.
Yeah. You and me both.
Let's do it.
So what's fascinating about this book is it's not just like some self-help book that's like, just be nice to people.
Right.
It actually breaks down the dynamics between different types of people.
Okay.
You know, we got givers, we got takers, and then the people in between the matchers. And so we're going to be looking at real stories, and you know how these different styles play out.
Yeah.
We'll see the surprising wins, but honestly, we'll also see some pitfalls.
Okay, so let's define these reciprocity styles.
Okay.
Like you said, givers are all about contributing.
Yes.
And not expecting something back.
Mm-hmm.
Takers, me first.
Yeah, what's in it for me?
And then matchers kind of want that even balance.
That's right.
The equal exchange.
Right.
But how do I figure out where I am in all this?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
One of the things Grant says you can do is just ask yourself, when somebody asks me for help, what's my usual reaction?
Okay.
So if you're like, oh yeah, I'd love to help you with that, you might be leaning toward the giver style.
Uh-huh.
But if you're a little more hesitant,
right,
maybe you're calculating what you're going to get in return. Yeah. You might be more of a matcher.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you just see helping as an inconvenience, you know, I don't have time for this.
Okay.
You might have some taker tendencies in there. But remember, you know, most people are somewhere on a spectrum.
Right.
It's not always black and white.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
It makes you think about your own, like, knee-jerk reactions.
Right.
But this whole idea that nice guys finish last,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't paint givers in the most
Yeah, that's the classic.
positive light.
Yeah, that's the classic trope, right?
Yeah.
And Grant actually takes that head on. He says, no givers can actually reach the top,
Right.
but there are some smart moves they need to make along the way.
Okay.
One of the big things is that givers need to be more strategic.
Yeah.
Especially in a world where others might try to take advantage of their generosity.
Speaking of getting taken advantage of,
Yeah.
he tells this really interesting story about this venture capitalist, David Hornick.
Yeah.
And Hornick is so excited about this entrepreneur's idea
Yeah.
that he really quickly puts together this funding offer.
Yeah.
And instead of the entrepreneur being like, yes, he's like, no, I think I'm going to go with this other investor.
Wow.
Because he's too nice.
Really?
Too nice.
That's not something you hear every day.
Right.
Yeah.
He was worried that Hornick wouldn't push him hard enough
Right.
to actually, like, build a successful business.
Interesting. So he wanted someone who would give him harder time.
Yeah.
Someone who would challenge him more.
Yeah. So that, I think, is a really good example of how sometimes generosity can be misinterpreted,
Yeah.
especially in a cutthroat environment.
Right. The entrepreneur wanted someone with a tougher reputation, someone who would really push him.
Right.
It's a good lesson for givers. You do need to be upfront about your expectations.
Yeah.
Make sure potential partners, you know, really understand your style.
Right.
While still respecting their need for a good push.
Okay, so then Grant throws in this completely different example
Okay.
of Abraham Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
And he was famous for inviting his rivals into his cabinet.
Right. That's so interesting.
I'm like, why would you give power to the people who were against you?
That's what makes Lincoln such a fascinating leader.
Yeah.
He wasn't afraid to surround himself with people who had really strong opinions, even opposing viewpoints.
Yeah.
He believed that tapping into those diverse strengths, even from former adversaries, would ultimately make him a better leader.
So maybe surrounding yourself with yes men is actually holding you back.
It could be.
Yeah.
There's definitely something to be said for having a little healthy debate.
Right. A little friction.
Exactly. And this actually ties back to the power of givers in teams.
Oh, okay.
Because you think about it when you're collaborating,
Yeah.
that willingness to contribute, to go the extra mile, it becomes a lot more visible and has a much bigger impact.
So it's not just about being nice. It's about how that niceness plays out in a team.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which kind of brings us to networking.
Yeah.
He talks about Adam Rifkin,
Yeah.
Fortune's best networker. This guy built a massive network by just consistently helping people.
Right.
No strings attached.
Yeah, Rifkin's approach is a great example of how giving can be a really powerful networking strategy.
Yeah?
And one thing that he really emphasizes is the value of what he calls dormant ties.
Okay.
Those are like the connections you haven't talked to in a while.
It makes you think about your own
Yeah.
network.
Yeah.
Like, who haven't I connected with in a while?
Yeah.
Maybe there's an untapped opportunity.
Yeah.
But how do you know if somebody's genuine?
Right?
Or just trying to take advantage?
Yeah. So Grant actually has a term for that. He calls it sincerity screening.
Sincerity screening.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's all about learning how to spot the takers
Mhm.
so you can protect yourself,
Right.
but also without becoming completely closed off to making new connections.
Right. So it's finding that balance
Exactly.
between the open heart,
Yeah.
but also protecting yourself.
Yeah. It's like you wouldn't invest in a company without doing your research right.
Right.
Building relationships should be no different.
Yeah.
You need to gather information,
Yeah.
look for patterns in their past behavior, see if their actions actually match their words.
Totally.
You got to be a smart giver,
Be a smart.
not just a blindly generous one.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got these givers
Mm-hmm.
building their networks,
Okay.
helping people.
Yeah.
But then what happens when it comes to collaborating,
Right.
working together?
It can be tough even with the best intentions.
Yeah.
So Grant highlights this contrast between George Meyer,
Okay.
a writer for The Simpsons.
I love The Simpsons.
Yeah, and then Frank Lloyd Wright,
Okay.
the famous architect.
Yeah.
So Meyer consistently took on these thankless rewriting tasks
Fine.
to make the show better, often without getting much credit.
What a giver.
Yeah.
The unsung hero.
Right. A classic giver.
Yeah.
But Wright, on the other hand, was known for being much more of a taker. He had incredibly talented apprentices,
Okay.
but because of his tendencies, a lot of them left his studio and actually struggled to make it on their own.
So it's like one guy elevates others and the whole team wins.
Yeah.
The other guy wants the recognition for himself.
Right. He hoards the spotlight.
And it ends up like stifling everybody.
That's right.
So what's the big takeaway there?
I think it really highlights the importance of what Grant calls perspective taking,
Okay.
which successful givers tend to be really good at.
Yeah.
They're able to understand other people's viewpoints and their feelings,
Mm-hmm.
which allows them to create solutions that benefit everyone involved.
It's like asking, how can we all win?
Exactly.
Instead of how can I win?
That's a much better approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which leads me to something I'm really curious about.
Okay.
Powerless communication.
Okay.
How can being powerless be a good thing?
It does sound a bit strange, doesn't it?
Yeah, especially at work.
Right.
Like, I don't want to be powerless.
Well, Grant makes a really compelling case for it.
Okay.
And it's a style that's often used by givers.
Okay.
He tells the story of this very successful lawyer, Dave Walton, who actually has a stutter.
Okay.
And despite this perceived weakness,
Mhm.
he actually found that it made him more relatable and believable to juries.
So what could be seen as a disadvantage actually works in his favor.
That's right.
How does that even work?
Well, it's about being authentic and approachable,
Okay.
even a bit vulnerable.
Yeah.
Think about things like asking questions,
Mm-hmm.
not pretending to have all the answers,
Okay.
even seeking advice from others.
Right.
It might seem counterintuitive, but these things can really build trust and make people more receptive to your ideas.
It's like you're disarming people a little bit.
Yeah,
You're showing them that you're human.
that's right. You're not this sort of like all-knowing expert.
Right.
You're someone who's willing to learn and grow. And givers are often naturally inclined towards this style of communication
Yeah.
because they genuinely want to hear what other people have to say.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But there's one more thing I think we need to unpack before we go any further.
Okay.
And that's the difference between selfless giving and something Grant calls otherish giving.
Otherish.
Otherish.
Okay, what's the difference?
So selfless giving is about putting everyone else's needs first.
Okay.
Sometimes to the point of burning yourself out or even getting taken advantage of.
Wait.
Otherish giving, on the other hand, is about finding that sustainable balance
Okay.
between helping others and taking care of yourself.
So it's not about being a doormat.
Exactly.
It's about finding a way to give that's actually energizing.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And Grant actually tells the story of Conry Callahan,
Okay.
a teacher who was just on the verge of burnout from giving too much.
Oh, yeah.
And she learned to manage her time better,
Mhm.
focus on projects that really resonated with her, and started setting boundaries so
Right.
she wouldn't get overextended.
So other-ish giving is about being intentional
Yeah,
and strategic
it is.
with your generosity.
Yeah.
Making sure that you're not sacrificing your own well-being
Absolutely.
in the process.
You got to take care of yourself, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about reciprocity styles.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about some really cool
Yeah.
and some not so cool examples
Yeah.
of givers in action.
That's right.
We've even talked about this other-ish giving.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
Well, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, boy.
There's so much more to unpack in give and take.
Okay.
One of the big questions that we're going to be tackling is, can you really be successful in a world that seems to reward a taker mentality?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
And if so, how?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we're going to find out.
Buckle up, everybody.
That's right. Yeah, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Can you be a giver and still reach the top?
Yeah.
It's a real dilemma.
Right.
And I think it speaks to this fear that a lot of givers have, that their generosity is going to be exploited. Grant calls this the doormat effect.
Well, the doormat effect.
Yeah.
That's so relatable.
Yeah.
That worry that if you're too nice, people are just going to walk all over you.
Right.
How do you balance being kind and being strong?
Well, Grant offers several strategies, and one that we already touched on is sincerity screening.
Sincerity screening.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's all about being able to tell the difference between someone who genuinely appreciates your help and someone who might just be trying to take advantage.
So you're not just like throwing help at anyone who asks.
Right.
You're really paying attention to like...
Exactly. You got to be discerning.
Yeah.
And this reminds me of what you said earlier about not investing in a company without doing your due diligence.
Right.
It's the same thing with relationships.
Yeah.
Especially for givers.
Okay.
Because Grant even tells the story of this financial advisor, Peter Audit.
Okay.
And early in his career, he had this boss who pocketed a Christmas bonus that was intended for Peter.
Oh, no.
Talk about a bad boss.
Right. How many givers have stories like that?
Oh, I'm sure there are so many.
Especially when they're starting out.
Yeah, especially when you're young and you're eager to prove yourself.
Yeah.
And you haven't learned all the red flags yet.
It's a good reminder that not everybody plays by the same rules.
That's right. And takers can be pretty good at hiding their true intentions.
So how do you actually sincerity screen?
Yeah.
Like, what are some of the red flags?
Well, Grant says one of the things you got to do is look past just personality.
Okay.
You know, just because somebody is agreeable and friendly doesn't automatically make them a giver.
Right.
They could be a taker in disguise.
You need to watch their actions more than their words.
So look at their track record.
Exactly.
Have they actually been generous in the past?
Yeah. It's like checking someone's references before you hire them.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Do your research.
Okay.
And if you do identify a potential taker, Grant suggests shifting gears.
Okay.
Instead of being a giver, try more of a matcher approach.
Okay, so you're not stooping to their level.
Right.
But you're also not letting them walk all over you.
You're setting boundaries.
Yeah.
Which is a form of self-care.
It is.
Right.
It goes back to that other-ish giving idea.
It absolutely does. Protecting yourself from exploitation is part of being a healthy giver.
Okay.
But remember, sincerity screening isn't just about avoiding takers.
Okay.
It's also about recognizing and supporting fellow givers.
Right.
Because when givers connect, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, and that reminds me of this other story about Jason Geller, who was a giver at Deloitte.
Right. And he created this elaborate knowledge management system.
Wow.
And just shared it freely with anybody who needed information.
That's incredible.
Or help.
Yeah, he really went above and beyond.
He saw it as like paying forward all the support he had received.
He was a true giver, just like Adam Rifkin.
Right.
But here's the interesting thing. The book also talks about Lillian Bauer.
Okay.
Another giver who, despite her talent and her hard work, saw her career actually stall.
So how can giving
That's the puzzle.
help one person's career and hurt another's?
Right. They were both givers.
Yeah.
And I think this really highlights a crucial point that Grant makes.
Okay.
Givers need to be strategic, not just blindly selfless.
Right.
Selfless giving can backfire.
Okay.
You can burn out, you can get resentful,
Right.
and it can hinder your own success.
So there's a difference between being a giver and being a pushover.
Huge difference.
Okay.
And it brings us back to other-ish giving. You need to find that sweet spot where your giving energizes you, where it helps both you and the people you're helping.
So back to Jason Geller.
Okay.
How did he manage to thrive as a giver while Lillian Bauer struggled?
Well, for one thing, he was very selective with his giving.
Yeah.
Initially, he offered help to anyone and everyone,
Yeah.
but he paid close attention to who was genuinely interested in learning and growing.
Okay.
And he used sincerity screening to identify those other givers and to avoid being taken advantage of.
So he was investing his energy wisely,
Yeah.
focusing on the people who would both benefit and contribute.
Exactly.
It's like teaching someone to fish
Yeah.
instead of just giving them a fish.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's about empowering others, not just giving handouts.
Right.
And this actually leads to another fascinating topic that Grant explores, which is the power of powerless communication.
Oh, yes.
Which we touched on earlier.
The lawyer with the scutter who turned that into a strength.
Right, Dave Walton.
Yeah.
Turns out that style of communication can be surprisingly effective.
So things like asking questions, admitting that you don't know everything,
Right.
being a little hesitant
Yeah.
in how you speak.
Exactly. It might seem counterintuitive,
Right.
but these tactics can actually build trust
Okay.
and make people more receptive to your ideas.
I guess it makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, it shows humility.
Right.
And it makes you more relatable.
It does. And it makes you seem less threatening,
Yeah.
which is really important
Right.
when you're trying to build relationships.
But does that really work in the real world?
Well, Grant gives the example of Bill Grumbles,
Okay.
an HBO salesperson who had no prior experience, but he achieved incredible success by simply asking questions and really listening to his customers.
Instead of trying to like push the sale, he really focused on
understanding their needs.
yes,
Yeah.
and then tailoring his pitch to that.
And Grant's research shows that this approach can be applied to all sorts of situations.
Oh, wow.
Persuasion, negotiation, even leadership.
Wait, powerless communication
Yeah.
in leadership.
It might sound strange, but think about it.
Yeah.
It's not about being incompetent.
Right.
It's about being open to input,
Okay.
recognizing that you don't have all the answers,
Right.
and valuing the perspectives of your team.
So it's more about fostering collaboration and making people feel safe to share their ideas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Grant argues that givers are particularly good at this style of leadership
Okay.
because they naturally prioritize the needs and perspectives of others.
Which makes me wonder if our traditional view of leadership, you know, that strong, decisive,
The take charge persona.
that take charge persona is actually holding us back from really building great teams.
It's a really interesting question and one that I think is worth exploring further. But let's get back to that big question we started with.
Sure.
Can you truly be successful in a world that often seems to reward a taker mentality?
Yeah.
It's something that a lot of people struggle with.
It feels like you have to be ruthless to get ahead,
Dog-eat-dog world.
which goes against everything we've been talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
So Grant tackles this head on. He looks at how givers not only survive, but actually thrive even in very competitive environments.
Okay.
And one of the first things that he does is he reminds us that giving isn't about being a martyr.
Yep.
It's about finding that balance between helping others and achieving your own goals.
It's that other-ish giving.
It is.
Right.
Yeah.
Being generous, but also ambitious.
That's right. You don't have to sacrifice your own success to be a giver.
Yeah.
In fact, he gives several examples of givers who've achieved really remarkable success.
Okay.
Take John Huntsman Sr., for example, the billionaire founder of Huntsman Corporation.
I've heard of him.
Yeah.
He's known for his philanthropy.
He is incredibly generous.
Yeah.
He's given away billions of dollars.
To causes like cancer research?
Yeah, to cancer research education.
Yeah.
All sorts of great causes.
They're incredible.
But here's the interesting thing.
Okay.
Huntsman doesn't see his giving as separate from his business success.
Okay.
He actually believes that his giving spirit contributed to his wealth.
So it's not get rich and then give back?
Right.
It's more like...
It's more like give and then get rich.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's actually some research that backs this up.
Really?
Yeah. Economists have found a correlation
Okay.
between charitable giving and income.
What?
People who give more to charity tend to earn higher incomes.
You'd think that giving away money would leave you with less.
Right. It's very counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But Grant suggests that giving might boost your energy, expand your network, and enhance your reputation in ways that ultimately lead to greater success.
So you're not just helping others.
Right.
You're helping yourself.
It's like generosity creates this positive feedback loop.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it's a win-win.
But it's not all about money, right?
No, it's not. Grant also points out that giving can boost your happiness,
Okay.
improve your health, even increase your lifespan.
Okay, now that's a return on investment.
Right.
I can get behind.
Yeah, it really shifts the perspective.
Yeah.
Giving isn't just a moral obligation.
Right.
It's actually a strategic advantage.
Okay, so we've really been looking at this through the lens of like individual givers.
Right.
But how do you shift the norms
Okay.
from taking to giving
Yeah.
when you're surrounded by people who
Right.
might exploit your generosity?
Yeah, it's a valid concern, but Grant actually has some really interesting ideas
Okay.
about how we can encourage what he calls a Scrooge shift.
A Scrooge shift.
A Scrooge shift.
Okay, is there magic fairy dust involved?
I wish it were that simple. But it's really about understanding the conditions that nudge people towards giving,
Okay.
even those who might be more naturally inclined to take.
So what are those conditions?
Well, one of the biggest factors is social influence.
Okay.
We tend to mimic the behavior of those around us. Grant tells the story about this experiment
Okay.
where researchers were trying to encourage people to conserve energy.
Okay.
And, they tried all these different messages.
Like about saving money.
Yeah, about saving money,
Really?
about environmental benefits. But the message that was most effective
Right.
was simply this: join your neighbors in conserving energy.
So it wasn't about logic.
No.
It was about what other people were doing.
It was about social norms.
Interesting.
Yeah. And this applies to giving, too.
Okay.
If we see other people being generous,
Mm-hmm.
we're more likely to do the same.
It's like that keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah, exactly. But for good.
Well, for good.
Yeah.
And that's where having giver role models is so important because it shows us that it's possible
Yeah,
to be generous and successful.
that's right.
Okay.
It challenges that myth that you have to be a taker
Right.
to get ahead.
Yeah.
And it's not just about finding those role models.
Yeah.
It's about becoming role models ourselves.
Paying it forward.
Paying it forward.
Yeah.
Inspiring others to become givers by setting a good example through our own actions.
Creating this ripple effect.
A ripple effect of generosity.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. But sometimes it feels like those grand acts of giving are
Yeah.
out of reach.
Right.
What about those of us who are just trying to get by, juggling work and life and everything else?
Yeah, that's where Grant's idea of making giving public comes in.
Making giving public.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because when people know that their actions are going to be seen and acknowledged,
Yeah.
they're more likely to be generous.
Okay. It's like getting that thank you letter
It is.
after you've donated to a charity.
Exactly. It's like a little pat on the back that says, hey, good job.
Yeah.
And it's especially effective for takers
Okay.
who are often motivated by status and reputation.
So even takers can be nudged toward giving
It's a possibility.
if they think it'll make them look good.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and there are actually examples of how this works.
Okay.
So Grant talks about this thing called the reciprocity ring.
Okay.
It's an exercise that he does with his students at Wharton, and it's a structured activity where people share requests and offer help to each other.
It's like one of those online platforms
Yeah.
where you can just ask for
Right.
advice or support.
It is similar. And what's really interesting is that in the reciprocity ring,
Yeah.
even takers feel compelled to contribute
Okay.
because they know if they don't offer help,
Right.
they're less likely to receive it
When they need it.
when they need it.
So you're creating a system
Yeah.
that incentivizes giving.
Exactly. Even for those who might not be naturally inclined towards it.
Right.
And Grant believes this principle can be applied to organizations as well.
To companies.
To companies, if you want to foster a culture of giving,
Yeah.
you need to create systems that encourage and reward it.
So it's not just hoping that people will be generous.
Right.
You're creating a structure
Yeah.
that makes it
You make it the obvious choice.
the obvious choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Grant has a lot of practical suggestions for how organizations can do this.
Like what?
Things like recognizing and celebrating giving behaviors,
Okay.
creating opportunities for employees to help each other,
Ah.
even incorporating giving metrics into performance reviews.
Oh, why?
Yeah. It's about making giving a part of the company culture.
So it's not just this like add-on. It's like built into
It's part of the fabric of the organization.
the fabric of the organization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when companies make this commitment, the benefits are really clear. Increased employee engagement,
Okay.
better collaboration,
Yeah.
a more positive and productive work environment.
Okay. That's a compelling argument.
Yeah.
But I have to be honest.
Yeah.
Part of me still wonders, Can we really create a world where giving wins out overtaking?
It is a big question.
Is it just wishful thinking?
It's a question that's been debated for centuries.
Yeah.
And Grant doesn't shy away from it.
Okay.
He actually dives into this whole debate about altruism.
Oh, wow.
Whether it's even possible to act purely out of a desire to help others.
Okay.
Or if we're always on some level motivated by self-interest.
Are we about to go down a philosophical rabbit hole?
Maybe a little bit,
Okay.
but it's a fascinating rabbit hole.
I'm here for it.
So Grant presents both sides of the argument,
Okay.
looking at the perspectives of C. Daniel Batson, who believes in pure altruism,
Okay.
and Robert Cialdini,
Okay.
who argues that all giving ultimately boils down to self-interest.
So it's like the nature versus nurture debate, but for generosity.
Exactly. And Grant, presents both sides fairly, but ultimately he lands on a more nuanced perspective.
Okay. I'm on the edge of my seat.
He suggests that it's not an either thing.
Okay.
Most of the time, our giving is probably driven by a mix of altruistic and self-interested motives.
So not pure selflessness.
Right.
Not pure selfishness.
It's somewhere in between.
Somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he actually sees this as a good thing.
Okay.
Because it means that even those who might be inclined towards taking
Yeah.
can be motivated to give if they see a potential benefit to themselves.
Which brings us back to making giving public.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if takers see that giving can boost their reputation
Right.
or increase their chances of receiving help in the future,
Right.
they might be more willing to get on board.
It's like turning giving into a strategy,
Exactly.
not just a nice thing to do.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And Grant uses the example of FreeCycle.
Oh.
You familiar with FreeCycle?
Yeah.
That online platform where people give away unwanted items for free?
It's a great way to declutter
It is.
and help people at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love it.
And Grant sees this as a perfect example of how even people who might be initially motivated by self-interest,
Right.
wanting to get rid of stuff,
Yeah.
can be drawn into this culture of giving.
Maybe they'll experience the joy of helping someone
Right.
and then start giving
Yeah.
for more altruistic reasons.
That's the hope.
Yeah.
And it supports Grant's belief that creating a world where giving trumps taking isn't about forcing people to be selfless.
Okay.
It's about designing systems and cultures
Right, yeah.
that encourage and reward giving behavior,
Right.
regardless of people's initial motivations.
I made it the easy choice.
Make it the easy choice,
The obvious choice.
the obvious choice.
And hopefully the most rewarding choice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about giving the best option.
Both for individuals
Yes,
and for society
that's right.
as a whole.
Yeah.
But all this talk about systems and structures,
Yeah.
it feels a little impersonal.
Right.
Where does the human element come in?
That's a great point. And I think that's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We'll look at the more personal side of giving,
Yeah.
how it impacts our relationships, our well-being,
Yeah.
and ultimately how we see ourselves.
All right. So we talked a lot about the big picture stuff.
Yeah.
How givers operate in the workplace, systems that can encourage generosity.
Right.
Even this whole philosophical debate
Yeah.
about altruism.
Right.
But I'm really curious about that personal side.
Okay.
You mentioned,
Yeah.
how does giving affect us as individuals?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that Grant spends a good chunk of the book exploring.
Okay.
He argues that giving, when done right, can be incredibly fulfilling.
Yeah.
It can boost our happiness, strengthen our relationships, even give us a sense of purpose.
But it's not always easy,
Right.
especially when we encounter situations where trust has been broken.
Oh, yeah, the trust dilemma.
Yeah.
This is something we all deal with at some point,
Mm-hmm.
but it seems especially relevant for givers
Yeah.
who might be more trusting
Right. Givers tend to be more trusting than takers or matchers.
than takers or matchers.
Yeah.
And that can make them
And that can make them vulnerable.
vulnerable.
Exactly. Grant tells this really interesting story about this consulting firm
Okay.
that was struggling to win over a new client.
Okay.
Now, these consultants were really talented and they genuinely wanted to help.
Okay.
But the client's executives had been burned by consultants in the past.
So they had that once bitten, twice shy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They were very skeptical.
Yeah.
And so the consultants tried all the usual tactics.
Okay.
They emphasized their confidentiality policies, their commitment to the client's best interests,
Yeah.
even their code of honor,
Right.
but nothing seemed to work. The executives were still wary.
They were still wary.
So how did they break through?
Well, the lead consultant His name was Philippe.
Philippe.
Yeah. He realized that just talking about trustworthiness wasn't enough.
Okay.
He needed to show them through actions.
Right. Actions speak louder than words.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Philippe proposed something pretty bold.
Yeah.
He said his firm would invest their own time and resources to develop a really detailed proposal for a reorganization.
Okay.
Even though there was no guarantee that the client would choose them.
That's a huge risk.
It was a big gamble.
Yeah.
But it paid off.
Okay.
The client was so impressed by their willingness to go above and beyond, to really invest in them without any strings attached, that it demonstrated real commitment.
It really showed that they can be trusted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great example of how a giver's natural inclination to help can actually be a really powerful tool for building trust.
But let's be honest, not all givers are as successful as Philippe and his team.
Yeah.
You know, we've seen examples of givers who end up feeling like doormats.
Right.
Getting taken advantage of, struggling to achieve their own goals.
So what separates those thriving givers
what is it?
from the ones who struggle? Well, one factor that Grant points to is the importance of role models.
Oh, the power of seeing someone else do it first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We all need inspiration, especially when we're trying something new or challenging ourselves.
Yeah.
And having a giver role model can be especially impactful.
Okay.
Because it shows us that it's possible to be both generous and successful.
Right. It breaks that stereotype.
It does. It debunks that myth that giving always comes at a cost.
Just like that struggling artist.
Right. The self-sacrificing martyr.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
And it shows us that you can be a good person and still achieve your goals.
These role models don't have to be like famous or anything.
No, they don't.
Right.
They can be everyday people in our lives. Teachers, mentors, colleagues.
Friends,
family members.
Yeah, it's encouraging to think that we're probably surrounded by giver role models.
I think we are.
Without even realizing it.
Yeah.
But it's not just about finding those role models.
Right.
It's about becoming one.
It's about paying it forward.
That's us.
Inspiring others to become givers by setting a good example through our own actions.
So it's like creating this ripple effect.
A ripple effect of generosity.
Where one person's giving inspires another.
And another, and another.
And another.
Exactly. And Grant believes that this can have a profound impact on the world around us.
That's like shifting the norms.
It is.
Yeah.
If we all try to be giver role models, we can create a culture where generosity is valued and celebrated.
I love that.
Yeah.
It makes giving feel more tangible.
Right.
Less like this big abstract concept.
Yeah.
More like something we can actually do every day.
And that leads to another piece of really practical advice that Grant offers.
Okay.
Which is to embrace those small acts of kindness.
Oh, yeah. The 5-minute favors.
The 5-minute favors, those seemingly insignificant things.
Right.
That can make a surprisingly big difference.
Like offering a word of encouragement?
Yeah.
To a coworker who's struggling?
Exactly.
Or taking the time to really listen to a friend
who
needs to vent.
Grant reminds us that we don't need to make these grand gestures to make a difference.
Yeah.
Sometimes those small everyday acts of giving are the most meaningful.
And they can have a ripple effect, too.
They can.
Right. Inspiring others to pay it forward.
Exactly. Yeah. It goes back to that idea of social influence.
Right.
You know, when we see other people being generous, we're more likely to be generous ourselves.
And this applies to organizations as well.
It does. If we want to create a culture of giving, we need to start by encouraging and rewarding those small acts of kindness.
So it's about making them visible.
Making them visible.
Right.
Recognizing and appreciating those everyday examples of generosity.
Yeah.
It can be as simple as, you know, thanking a colleague who went above and beyond, or publicly acknowledging someone's contributions during a team meeting.
So making giving not just valued, but celebrated.
That's right.
And when companies do this, we've seen that it creates a more engaged, collaborative,
productive work environment.
It really is a win-win.
It is.
But I got to admit, after this whole deep dive, there's still a part of me that wonders, can we really create a world where giving consistently trumps taking?
It's a big question.
Is it a lofty goal?
It's a really lofty goal. And it's one that give and take really pushes us to grapple with.
Yeah.
But I think the book ultimately offers a really hopeful message, suggesting that generosity might be a more powerful force than we realize.
Well, it's definitely been a thought-provoking journey for me.
Yeah.
And I would encourage our listeners
Yeah.
to check out Give and Take.
Absolutely.
And see what resonates with them.
Read it for yourselves.
Yeah.
Form your own opinions.
Absolutely.
And as you navigate this world of givers and takers and matchers, remember this. Giving, when done strategically and authentically, can be a source of incredible fulfillment, both personally and professionally.
Embrace that giving spirit.
Yes.
But be smart about it.
Be smart about it.
And who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe you'll start a ripple effect that transforms the world around you.
I love that.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Give and Take.
Yeah, this is fun.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep giving